All right, we are live, everybody. I am here with Alexander Mercouris in London and Gonzalo Lira in a location that we cannot disclose. No, I'm joking, Gonzalo. With Gonzalo Lira in the north of
in the Kharkov,
northeast of Ukraine.
Yes.
Yes. So. We're losing your sound a little bit,
losing your sound.
Gonzalo.
Yeah. Am I good there? Sorry about that.
We can hear you now.
Yes,
I can hear you. I
perfect,
can hear you clearly.
perfect,
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
Now your sound is perfect. All right, so let's just get into it. We're going to have to do a hard stop, everybody, at around an hour and 45 minutes, around there. So we'll do a hard stop. Any questions that are sent, we will do a dedicated show to answer all of the questions. If we have time to answer some questions towards the end of the show, we'll definitely answer those questions as well. From Rumble, from Odyssey, from YouTube, and of course, the duran.locals.com, our great locals community. So send us your questions. We will answer all of them either today or in another dedicated show that we'll be putting up on our channels. Gonzalo, real quick, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Gonzalo Lira 1968. That's my current Twitter handle. And you can also find me at Gonzalo Lira 2 on YouTube. Because I don't yet have access to my old accounts because the SBU changed my passwords. But as soon as I get that back online, it'll back to normal. But for now, on Twitter, Gonzalo Lira 1968. And right there, you'll find a link to my YouTube channel. So you should have no trouble finding me. Gonzalo Lira 1968.
And those are the only two official social media accounts for you, correct?
Yeah, the only thing that's official. Anything else except no substitute. Yes.
Okay, and I will pin those in the comments section when this live stream is over. So I will pin those channels up top in the comments so everybody can find them. So let's get going, everybody. Hello to our moderators as well. Real quick, a shout out to Zariel. I saw Zariel in here in the chat moderating, and I think Zariel, you are on your own for now, if I'm not mistaken. But I will be helping you out as well, Zariel. So thank you to our moderators and any of the moderators that are going to come into the show later on. Let's get started. Ukraine, Russia, and Poland. We had a very interesting op-ed, guys, from the Polish Prime Minister in the Telegraph, where he pretty much says that the collective West needs to eradicate the Ruski Mir, the Russian ideology. He calls it de-Putinification. De-Putinization. That's a direct quote, by the way. So anyway, Gonzalo, what do you think of this? Alexander, what do you think of this?
The cope is off the charts. That's what I think. I don't think anything else intelligent can be said about it. It's just an irrational hatred. And that irrational hatred has made Europe incredibly rash decisions that have driven its economy off a cliff. The European economy is crashing as we speak. Inflation, the price of gasoline, the price of heating oil, the price of food, everything. The European economy is crashing because these Euro fools, because that's what they are, thought that they could mess with Russia and that it wouldn't have any kind of impact on them because they stupidly bought their own propaganda and thought to themselves that Russia, it's a small economy, it's the size of Italy's, which is just an absurd kind of self-delusion. And so they imposed sanctions, and those sanctions have gone and hurt them badly. And now on top of that, they have the gall to say that Russia is weaponizing food. Because today Putin gave a speech where he talked about the wheat harvest, and he said it was one of the best ever. And it's on track to be one of the best ever, rather. And so all of a sudden the West is saying, well, you're weaponizing food. And it's like, you guys weaponize the entire financial system and try to break the Russian economy. And now you're upset that you might get consequences coming your way? Come on. How disingenuous can you get? Alexander, do you agree with this assessment or not?
Completely agree. Can I just say straight away that one of the most classic examples of, if you like, Western arrogance, vanity, conceit, call it whatever you like, is that Western leaders, Western, to some extent, Western publics, you've got to be honest about this, have this view that they have a right to impose sanctions upon others, but there cannot ever be consequences for them.
Yes.
Others obviously must never impose sanctions upon them. If somebody dares do that, that's weaponization of whatever, food, oil, gas, what have you, or it's blackmail. I mean, sanctions are not blackmail when they're imposed by the West, but they are blackmail when they're imposed by someone else.
Yeah.
And of course, if somebody has the gall to take action to try to parry or mitigate the effects of sanctions upon themselves, then that is absolutely appalling. That's completely outrageous. And of course, if that's done in a way that also impacts on Western economies, that's doubly outrageous. And another example of weaponization. What is happening in the West, and we're only at the early stages, very early stages of this, is that Western governments back in February disregarded the advice of the Federal Reserve Board, of the financial community, of the oil and gas and energy industries. They imposed sanctions on Russia. They seized the assets of its central bank. They imposed sanctions on the central bank. They imposed they de-swifted several Russian banks. They orchestrated a withdrawal of Western companies from Russia, and they imagined that this tiny economy, as they believed it to be, this gas station masquerading as a country, would tumble and collapse like a house of cards. And to their, I think, horror, but it's a horror that they can't openly admit, none of the things that they expected have happened. Instead of the ruble crashing, and I can, it's still there on the White House website. You can see the anonymous official bragging after they'd sanctioned the central bank that the ruble will go into free fall. To their bafflement, the ruble has strengthened. The Russian economy has stabilized. There's signs of growth. I mean, obviously there's a recession, but there's signs of growth. As you say, the grain harvest is looking particularly strong. Oil production is increasing. Manufacturing is, going through a difficult period, but the indications are that will run its course by the autumn or late winter, and then will start to reverse its falls and start to grow again. Even the Economist admitted that everyday life in Russia continues normally. And this is something that they did not expect. And they did not expect that they would find themselves in an economic war of attrition, which, unlike the Russians, they are not prepared for. So their response is they're going to throw everything bar the kitchen sink at the problem, at the Russians, in other words. And then they look on baffled, firstly, as it doesn't work, and secondly, as it backfires on them. And this is the first time that Western publics have been directly affected by a sanctions war that the West has waged. The West has waged sanctions wars on many countries, on Iran, on Iraq, on Cuba, on lots and lots of different places. Yeah. And it's hardly caused a ripple. This sanctions war is exactly as you said, causing an enormous recession. And just before I finish, you mentioned the effect it's having on the European economy. Well, I got an email yesterday from somebody very close to me in Greece, and he tells me that his normal electricity bill up to now has been around 90 euros a month. It's just risen to 320.
Oh,
and he also tells me that the people in the organization he works for are in utter despair, and with food prices rising, because they're rising, with energy costs rising, Many of them are now facing a situation where they have no money to cover all their costs.
Yeah, the mentality. What I find so amusing is the mentality of like, we're going to impose sanctions, and oh my goodness, how on earth could you dare impose sanctions on us? That's blackmail. That's weaponization. I mean, in any other context, you'd think that it's cynicism, that they're just being cynical lowlifes. But the funny thing is that it's genuine. They're genuinely surprised. It's the attitude of children. By the way, is my sound okay?
Yep. Absolutely, okay. I can hear you clearly.
Okay, good. No, it's the attitude of spoiled children that, they kick you in the shins, and when you respond by kicking them in the shins, they're shocked, just like spoiled children. Anyway, look, I did a video that has gained some traction on my new channel, where I basically call it, and I say that by the end of the year, the Western economies are going to be crashing. It's going to be inflation. It's going to be a lack of food. And I think that is the key issue. There's going to be a lack of food, and we're already starting to see it. In the United States, there is an issue with baby formula that I find just shocking. Okay, but okay, there's that's starting to happen in the United States of all places.
Yeah.
But in Europe is a net importer of food. It is a net importer of energy. When you cut off, number one, a big customer for all your finished goods, but much more importantly, a big supplier of your energy and food needs. Where do you go? And look, all this nonsense talk about negotiating with Qatar to get more liquid natural gas and all this nonsense. It's very, very simple. The Europeans need more gas than anyone else on earth can provide. They need Russian gas one way or the other. They need Russian oil one way or the other. The thing is, see, with the oil, there are going to be ways, as you described them in a previous broadcast, Alexander, of basically manipulating paperwork and shipping routes so that Russian oil basically gets to Europe only with extreme markups, right? But at least they'll get the oil. With the natural gas, they're not going to get the natural gas. And the Ukrainians, a couple of days ago, out of the blue, for no reason whatsoever, announced that they were cutting off 1/3 of the gas supply to Europe through one of the pipelines. I forget the name of it at this point. I'm sure one of you guys can help me out here. The name of the pipeline, it doesn't really matter. The point is that this pipeline went through Lugansk, and neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians during this conflict have messed with the natural gas pipelines because, of course, both benefit. The Russians benefit by selling the gas. The Ukrainians benefit by skimming off some of the gas and collecting the transit fees. And so during this war, neither side has messed with those pipelines. But all of a sudden, 2 days ago, it started yesterday morning at 7 in the morning on May 11th, the Ukrainians cut off the gas supply, citing technical reasons that are just nonsense. There were no technical reasons whatsoever. And all of a sudden, Germany has 25% less natural gas than before. What do you think that that's going to have in terms of effect, the knock-on effect on German industry, let alone the issue of inflation of the euro in Germany? This is a catastrophe. And in Europe, they're taking it very la-di-da, no problem. And why exactly is Ukraine cutting them off? Because it wasn't the Russians. The Russians are happy to keep on supplying them. The Ukrainians were saying, oh, you have to change the gas pipeline. And Gazprom said, no, we can't change the gas pipeline because it's just technically not possible. It has to go through this pipeline. And I'm sure that that's the actual reason. The Ukrainians, for some reason, decided to do this. And by the way, I have no doubt in my mind that the Ukrainians would never have made such a decision unilaterally. They must have gotten the okay from the United States, possibly Britain as well, but certainly the United States. Victoria Nuland would never allow Zelensky to make such a decision all on his own. And so clearly, and I wanted to talk to you guys about this, clearly there was a political motivation, but for the life of me, I do not understand why they took this decision. Do you guys know?
No, I don't know, but I'm going to make a few guesses. One is that I think the Ukrainians and some other people are probably incredibly angry about the fact that gas for rubles, Putin's project, is now working. Now, we heard a few days ago the Russians say that 10 big European energy companies have opened corresponding ruble accounts at Gazprom Bank. And one of the big German companies actually came out openly and confirmed it. And then we heard yesterday that another 10 big European energy companies have now joined the first 10. So that brings it up to 20. And that another 14 are planning to do it. So, in other words, gas for rubles has won. And I think that's caused some people in Ukraine great anger. And it may not have been entirely unrelated to the fact that Annalena Baerbock, Germany's so-called foreign minister, has been in Kiev meeting with Zelensky and other officials. And it may also have been intended as some kind of a signal to the Germans that the Ukrainians are very, very angry that Europe has capitulated on gas for rubles, and as a result that they're restricting the energy flows. I agree, whatever the reasons behind it, and I don't think we yet know fully what the reasons were. The US was definitely involved, and I wonder, how long it will hold. But again, I go to the British media about all of this. It's not the Ukrainians who are interfering with the gas. It's the Russians. They're supposedly siphoning off gas.
What?
Why would the Russians siphon off gas to Europe? Are the Russians short of gas? The world's biggest producer of natural gas is suddenly run short of gas? I mean, it doesn't make any kind of sense. We get every kind of ludicrous explanation. No word about what the real reasons are. I'm sure there's going to be extremely angry telephone calls between various European companies and their governments. What those governments will be doing and what they'll be saying to Kiev is another matter again. But we have a situation in Europe, and can I just again briefly touch on the oil business? Because again, I have had some experience here. I mean, not with oil business, but with shipping. I've known some ship owners in my time, some Greek ship owners. I know how these things are done. I mean, I've not myself been directly involved in doing them, but I know people who have done them. It's incredibly simple. Greece has now clawed out an exemption from the oil embargo on Russian oil. Greek tankers are allowed to ship Russian oil around the world. Alex Christoforou explained in a other program that we did on the duran that basically the Greek shipping industry, which is the major component of the Greek economy, depends on this kind of trade, and the Greek ship owners, who are an oligarchical power like no other in Greece, basically told the Prime Minister, the Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis, either you claw out this exemption or you're out. And the Greeks were joined in this by Malta and Cyprus, where obviously the same things also apply. So what's going to happen is that you're going to get Russian oil tankers, rather Greek oil tankers, and other oil tankers, Maltese, Cypriot, from all sorts of countries. They're going to be tanking up in Vladivostok or Murmansk or wherever on Russian oil. And then they're going to be sailing in a straight line to Europe. But before they get to Europe, we're going to have all kinds of fictional transactions taking place. Only they won't be exactly paper transactions.
Paper magic.
Absolutely. And let's not be sentimental about this. Let's not be naive. Money's going to pass. All sorts of people. It's going to be made, shall we say, attractive for them. All kinds of things are going to be agreed. And eventually that oil will arrive in Europe. Only by the time, of course, it arrives in Europe, it will have been comprehensively laundered. And of course, again, European energy companies will know where that oil is coming from. But they have their customer needs to meet, and they will look the other way. And so will Western governments and Western enforcement agencies. Every so often, some minor trader is going to be picked up and hauled in because he's involved in this kind of dealing. But the big fish will go on doing it. So more expensive oil, much more expensive oil for Europe, because they'll be paying a massive premium, because there'll be all these middlemen taking their cut. Russians will obviously get less of their oil than they would have done if they were able to sell it directly and straightforwardly to Europe. But in a situation where there's a commodity super cycle, which has been made worse by all these sanctions, they'll still be making an awful lot more than they were, say, a year ago. And the European consumer is going to be screwed. And a lot of people are going to become extremely, fabulously rich. That's what's going to happen. That's what the situation is setting up.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that the markup is going to be astronomical. And on top of that, I mean, the global, the benchmark prices are going to be sky high. If you tell me that in, I don't know, 6 months' time, we're talking $200 a barrel, I would not be surprised at all.
No, I would not.
And on top of that, they're going to slap on, because of all this legal magic that they'll have to put in order to launder the oil from Murmansk to Bremen. They're going to have to, mark it up 20% without breaking a sweat. And so the only people who are going to pay for this are European consumers.
Yeah.
They will have to make the decision this coming winter whether they eat or they have heat.
Yeah.
That will be the choice that European consumers will have to make.
Yeah.
And on top of that, because of this conflict, the Ukrainian farmers are not planting seeds. And so their wheat harvest this year is going to be catastrophic.
Yeah.
And there are certain countries like Egypt in particular, that's the one I'm worried about, where they depend on Ukraine grain. It is their it is their lifeblood. It's their source of food. They have long-term contracts with Ukraine, which will not be fulfilled. And so what will happen with the Egyptian people? In 2011, all of the Arab Spring revolutions and whatnot happened because there was a minor dip in Eurasian grain production, in Russian and Ukraine grain production. This is going to be a big hit on the global wheat market. Come September, October, we're going to see riots in the Middle East and in Egypt like we've never seen before. And more to the point, we're going to see enormous waves of migrants going to Europe, where, so many of these people think that in Europe, it's the streets are paved in gold. And so they are going to risk crossing the Mediterranean. They are going to get to Germany like nothing before. I mean, it's going to make 2014 look like nothing. This is going to be a disaster for Europe.
Yeah.
And these people don't seem to understand it, and they have the mentality of children. And let's not even start talking about these moron Finns and these idiot Swedes who are saying, oh, it would be a great idea to end our 80 years of neutrality and join NATO so we can put nuclear weapons right in front of St. Petersburg. Fools! What is wrong with you?
I know. Let's come to that in a moment, because I do want to follow up with this economic thing, because you're absolutely correct. One does start to see in some places the first glimmers of reality starting to break through. So the one major place of reality is Hungary, and Orban apparently has now said to Ursula von der Leyen that the only kind of oil embargo that he's going to support is one which allows pipeline oil from Russia to continue as before. In other words, no restrictions on it. The only limits will be on that he's prepared to be happy with is oil that's shipped by tanker. In other words, by sea. Now, as I understand it,
that hurts the Germans or the French, basically.
Exactly. So that's what Orban is saying. By the way, I understand most Russian oil to Europe. I don't think all of it by any means, but I believe that, a critical mass of it goes by pipeline, which is one reason why it's cheaper, by the way. But anyway, that's what Orban is saying. Whether the European Union will agree to that is another matter. And never underestimate the ability of these people to railroad this through. Yeah. But anyway, Orban is talking, rationally. You're getting a whole succession of German CEOs of big industrial companies and indeed small industrial. My dog wants to just go out. Can I just let him go a moment?
Sure, sure. No, I look about the whole situation with Europe. It's falling apart. That seems increasingly clear. And so the issue becomes, who is going to put some sanity in place? I mean, that's the question. Who is going to be the adult in the room? Because so far, all I see are children. And you're saying, Alexander, that some German businessmen are going to wake up.
No, well, I mean, that's it, because of course they're talking, they're all coming out, they're saying this is insane, this has got to stop, we've got to find a negotiated solution. That's what the CEO of Bosch said. They're all saying, this can't continue if we cut off from gas. And of course, you're absolutely right about the problems with gas. That's going to make our situation far worse. We're going to get to gas in a moment, because there are implications about this Ukrainian gas cutoff. So they're saying all of this. The political class in Germany, apart from the fringe, which basically means the AfD for this purpose, are not listening. They're not paying any attention. Mario Draghi in Italy, who is many things, corrupt, despicable, obnoxious, but he's no fool, and he can do all the maths. He apparently went to Washington and had a meeting with Biden and said, look, there has to be a negotiated solution to this. But, what influence he has, I really don't know. And I wouldn't expect there to be very much. But at least one gets the sense that he understands that we're driving ever faster off a cliff. The political class is completely oblivious to all of this. And now, can I just turn to the gas? Because you had mentioned Qatar. Robert Habeck, who was the German economics minister, went to Qatar. I think it was at the beginning of March. And he came away saying that he had a deal with Qatar. And I said he didn't have a deal with Qatar. I said that the Qataris said, we're absolutely willing to sell you liquefied natural gas if you want. Bring your companies, we'll talk about it. But Habeck told the German people that he'd agreed a deal with Qatar. Well, we now see that this deal isn't anywhere near complete. There's arguments about this. The Qataris apparently are not happy with some of Habeck's ideas, because Habeck wants to leave it open to go for his, windmills and his solar power and all of that. And I suspect eventually there will be a deal, but goodness knows how long that's going to take. I mean, it's nowhere near enough to make up for the lost gas from Russia. You need to replace pipeline gas fast if you're going to be cut off entirely from it. Liquefied natural gas can't substitute for pipeline gas. There isn't anywhere near enough of it at the moment. You'd have to divert the entire liquefied natural gas fleet to be providing Europe, and there isn't anywhere the machinery in Europe to process it. Yeah. What Habeck has actually been doing, because he wants to say to everybody that he's reduced German dependence on natural gas, Russian gas, by 3/4 by the end of the year. What he's actually been doing is he's been buying as much Russian gas as he can to fill the underground reserves in Germany. And of course, he's able to conceal the extent to which he's doing it, because he sees the Russian Gazprom subsidiary, which manages these reserves, these underground reserves. Well, he can't do it now because the Ukrainians are cutting off a sizable part of the gas supply. And at the same time, he's having to divert gas to Poland and other places, but Poland is the big one, to make up for the fact that the Poles are refusing to go along with gas for rubles. So he is running out of gas to achieve what he wanted to achieve. Even if he achieved it, it would only be a temporary solution. But at the moment, it's not looking as if he's even going to manage that. Mm-hmm.
No, I'm just laughing at all these, these like machinations, all this nonsense. Instead of just being straightforward about it and saying, "Look, we hate the Russians. Russians evil. Putin the devil. Blah blah. But we need the gas, and so we're just gonna have to bite the bullet." Just be a grown up about it.
Yeah.
And all of these efforts that are so pointless. I mean, just back of the envelope calculations leads you to conclude that there's no possibility of having Qatari natural gas replace Russian natural gas. Also, there's something else too. I certainly do not understand the ins and outs on a technical level, but I do understand that gas is not a fungible commodity. Oil is not a fungible commodity. There are different types of gas. There are different types of oil, of crude oil, that they are used for different purposes and very specialized and very expensive and hard to install equipment is used to refine the different kinds of these natural resources. And so it's not like money, $100 here or $100 there. It's all the same. It's fungible. It's exactly the same. But oil and natural gas are not so fungible. But people act as if they are, and these leaders act as if they are. They don't seem to understand the technical limitations to this whole process, and they screw themselves up to knots instead of just having the humility to say, "Look, we screwed up. We made a horrible decision, and we'll just have to walk it back." But the thing is, see, their pride is going to be paid for by the people. It's like the Polish situation. The Poles refused to do the euros for rubles scheme. And so who pays for it? The Germans. The Germans are paying for Polish pride. It's absurd. And it's all based on ego, on pride, on arrogance, instead of facing facts. And like I said, the people who are going to pay for this are the general public. It's going to be the older people who are on fixed incomes, people who are on pensions. They are not going to be able to afford food. They are not going to be able to afford heating. And these are elderly people. Okay. So what are the European governments going to do? Print more money? Money printer go burr? And just hand out €1,000 bills to whoever comes asking? I mean, you have to be responsible and manage your economy responsibly, but they're obviously not.
Well, indeed. I mean, the pressure at the moment in Germany is to get interest rates raised. I mean, the Bundesbank has now come out and said that the ECB must raise interest rates. I don't know what interest rates can realistically do, given that you have a supply crisis. But the idea, obviously, is to try to reduce demand. In other words, what the Germans are saying is that you've got to organize a recession.
Basically.
I mean, that's the only real way that you can balance everything and bring things back to a manageable level. But of course, a recession might actually balance things, but it's critically difficult for people. And of course, if it is going to result in a surge of unemployment, a collapse in investment, all of those things, then of course, further down the road, welfare payments, very high in Germany, by the way, are not going to be sustainable either, because you need that growing economy to keep that going. Remember, Germany, productivity in Germany has been falling. I mean, I don't mean, it's absolutely falling, but the rate of productivity over a sort of long period has not been increasing as the, German population is natural growth has been below replacement levels. You can make that up to a certain extent with immigration, but we know that there's problems with that. We're not going to get into those problems at the moment. And anyway, it's not ultimately a substitute because those people have not been through the German education training systems and all of these things. So it's going to be a real problem. But that seems to be the only answer that anybody has at the moment, except, of course, Draghi telling Biden, we've got to look for a negotiated peace. Now, at some point, I presume the penny will drop. But coming back to what you were saying, Gonzalo, at the start of the program, I think that we are in the beginnings of a major economic recession in the West. And of course, the worry I have, and I think the worry everybody has, is that we have a huge burden of debt that's been allowed to build up over a long, long time. So if we start getting into a recession situation, if we start getting interest rates grow, then of course that recession could be grisly. I mean, it could be much worse than the recessions that we've experienced recently. And I think that is something that, again, hasn't been factored in. I mean, the Fed is still talking about a soft landing. But I read even in the Financial Times, which is, neocon central in Europe, in Britain, and doesn't really want any criticism of the Fed or anything like that. But even the Financial Times, I was reading a commentary there by Martin Wolf, one of its commentators, who said that it's going to be all but impossible to achieve a soft landing. So we're heading to a recession. We're heading into recession. It could be a grisly recession. And we're in the middle of, in the meantime,